The galaxy tuned in with attention so sharp it seemed to vibrate in the airwaves. Across nebulae and star clusters, citizens of 1,000 worlds gathered around projectors, tablets, and communal screens, all connected to the same Imperial emergency broadcast. Even the machines noticed it, a sudden lull in data traffic, as if processors themselves were bracing for impact. The High Sovereign appeared at the center of the transmission. His ceremonial armor gleamed with excessive polish, and his voice cut through the stillness like a blade with no intention of mercy. General Valera, north of the human species, he announced, has been executed for crimes against the Empire. Beside him, the body of a woman lay on a sterile slab of silver alloy, covered with a banner dyed in the Empire's crimson crest, a death presented as spectacle. The sovereign let silence stretch, expecting cheers or at least murmurs of support. None came. Among alien spectators, confusion swirled first, then quiet dread. Whispers rippled through observation halls and council chambers. Humans will shatter, muttered a crystalline envoy. They grieve with case, added a minister with too many teeth. They are too sentimental to respond effectively. But an old Valyri elder, his moss-colored skin shifting like wind-touched vines, disagreed. You misread them, he murmured. Their first response will not be tears. What then? Someone asked. A smile. Many laughed at that, brushing it off as mysticism. They shouldn't have. Across the Sol territories, humans were not screaming or rushing into retaliation. They were turning inward. They went still. Horribly, purposefully still. Then, the next figure appeared on the feed. Earth's representative, Commander Jonah Hale. He stepped into view with pristine posture, hair slicked back, and a steaming mug of coffee emblazoned with cheerful human humor. World's nicest problem. He smiled, but it wasn't joy or acceptance. It was the deeply unsettling human smile that appeared right before something historic happened. Marriage proposals, scientific breakthroughs, or catastrophic decisions. Thank you for the update, Jonah said gently, as if acknowledging a minor scheduling change. General North was a mentor to me. I appreciate the confirmation. The chamber, half filled with physical delegates and half with holographic avatars, froze in confusion. Was he grateful, resigned, forgiving? The more they tried to interpret him, the less sense he made. Jonah sipped his coffee slowly, savoring the flavor with absolute calm. We humans appreciate closure, he added. Your message has provided that. Had the sovereign understood human idioms, emotional cues, or the dangerous softness of Jonah's tone, he might have recognized that closure, spoken quietly by a calm human, was not peace, it was a warning elegantly wrapped. But the sovereign was ignorant and emboldened by his own performance. Your species' resistance ends here, he declared. This execution is mercy. Jonah's smile warmed even further, disturbingly out of place. Ah, mercy, he repeated, as if tasting the word will respond appropriately. That single adverb rippled through the chamber. Humans used appropriately the way other species use prepare your wills. Jonah didn't elaborate. Instead, he slid a tin across the Senate table toward the sovereign's projected form. Chocolate chip cookies, he said pleasantly. A small Earth comfort food helps during difficult discussions. The sovereign stared at the tin as if it held a bioweapon. In a way, it did. Cultural, psychological, symbolic, a ritual. And when humans ritualized something, it meant they had already committed. Across human space, diplomats quietly withdrew from foreign posts. Civilian transports rerouted with mechanical precision. Patrol ships vanished from standard lanes. Satellites blinked offline in coordinated silence, not because they were attacked, but because humans had turned them off. The galaxy observed and trembled. Humans were not defending. They were preparing. Jonah offered one last polite sentence. Before we proceed with our proportional response, Earth will briefly withdraw from the Senate activity. We need time to gather ourselves. His tone was calm, almost soothing, but beneath it lay ice. Gather for what? Someone demanded. Jonah's eyes glimmered with a spark no alien could decipher. We're simply bringing out something we've kept stored for a while, he said. He paused. Our emergency cookout kit. The Senate chamber erupted into a storm of voices, hisses, clicks, oscillations, and modulated tones, each species reacting in its own language of fear. Yet Jonah Hale stood at the center of the chaos like a calm lighthouse, steady amid turbulent seas. A mechanical diplomat, shaped like an inverted teardrop, vibrated anxiously. Commander Hale, clarify. What is an emergency cookout kit? A tradition, Jonah replied with breezy warmth. Fire, smoke, heat. He winked. Lots of heat, you'll see. To alien ears, humor was often misinterpreted as threat, and this moment was no exception. Entire rows of delegates shifted backward. The High Sovereign, still projecting dominance from his remote throne room, sneered. You attempt intimidation through theatrics. Humans cannot frighten the Empire. Jonah raised his mug slightly, offering a serene toast. Of course not. You already appear sufficiently frightened on your own. Silence fell like a drop veil. Even the automated scribe paused mid-keystroke. Far from the chamber, Earth's fleets shifted in perfect synchrony. Lunar Command lit up with encrypted signals. Carriers glided into formation along the system's edge with soft, ominous grace. The kind of organization humanity only displayed at weddings, funerals, and impending catastrophes. The wise species recognized the pattern instantly. This is not retreat, whispered the Valyria elder. This is rearrangement. Across the Sol colonies, families were quietly relocated, engineers sealed dormant facilities, and communication arrays went dark in precise sequence. No alarms, no speeches. Humans acted with the eerie efficiency of a species that had already rehearsed tragedy many times throughout history. In the Senate, Jonah continued with polite formality. Our withdrawal will be brief. Meanwhile, we offer goodwill. He placed another item on the table, a metal flask decorated with cartoon flames. The sovereign glared at it. What trivial nonsense is this? Jonah shrugged lightly. A warming beverage. Humans find comfort in sharing heat. You insult us with childish gestures, snapped a reptilian delegate. Jonah shook his head. No. If I were insulting you, you'd know. Humans are very direct with insults. This did not comfort anyone. The sovereign regained some of his false composure. Your species' over-emotional nature is your downfall. You act with hearts, not with discipline. Jonah closed the tin of cookies and folded his hands. That's a common assumption. He leaned forward with measured calm. Human quiet is not weakness, it is alignment. Delegates shivered. Alignment was a terrifying word among species who used committees to decide which direction to sneeze. A tentative senator dared to ask, what exactly are your people aligning for? Jonah smiled with gentle pride. Phase 1. The sovereign scoffed. What phase 1? Jonah only tapped the table twice. At that precise moment, every listening post across the galaxy detected something that made even hardened admirals pale human fleets began disappearing from normal space. Thousands of ships flickered off sensors simultaneously. Not destroyed, not cloaked, simply gone. Like candle flames snuffed out by invisible fingers. No jump signatures, no warp wakes, just absence. Panic detonated through the Senate. Where are they going? What technology is this? Why vanish without a trace? Are they approaching us? Jonah stood up with calm, unhurried grace. He buttoned his uniform with a soft click. We appreciate your hospitality, he said with the tone of someone concluding a dinner party. We'll be in touch. Before the sovereign could demand answers, the human hologram vanished. For 3 long seconds, the chamber remained frozen. Then pandemonium erupted. Analysts scrambled to resurrect broken data streams. Admirals barked contradictory orders. And every interface, from handheld scanners to planetary supercomputers, kept repeating the same chilling conclusion. No human signatures detected. The sovereign's facade cracked. Search the border sectors. Track their fleets. Now. But there was nothing to track. A young alien cadet whispered what the entire chamber feared to say aloud. Sir, humans do not disappear unless they intend to. Before anyone could respond, every star map flickered violently. New signals emerged, faint, synchronized, deliberate. Massive gravitational distortions bloomed in distant, forgotten sectors of space. Jonah's voice, pre-recorded, calm, inevitable, drifted through the darkened chamber. Phase 2 begins when the lights go out. And then, as if obeying a cosmic cue, the lights died. The Emperor's war room descended into chaos. Red lights flickered across the vast, cold expanse, casting shadows on trembling officers who scrambled to interpret their failing systems. Communications went dark. Tactical screens scrambled static and fragments. Yet amid the panic, a calm figure appeared. Jonah Hale, his holographic form steady as the rest of the galaxy shook. "We are not retreating," he said, his voice carrying a note of certainty that made the air grow heavier. "We are simply resetting." The sovereign's eyes narrowed, and his lip curled in a mix of disbelief and anger. "You've shut down your fleets. You've erased your presence. What game is this?" Jonah's gaze softened, but only just. "It's not a game, Sovereign. It's a plan." For a brief moment, the galaxy could hear nothing but the faint hum of the holographic interface. The word plan echoed through the chamber, unsettling the Emperor. He opened his mouth to shout orders, but Jonah's next words cut him off, quieter than before. "The lights will stay off until they're needed." Silence lingered, broken only by the soft, measured clicks of the Sovereign's fingers as he steepled them in an attempt to regain control. He had underestimated humanity before, but now the atmosphere seemed to thicken with a menace he could not place. "Don't mistake our quiet for defeat," Jonah continued, as though he were addressing not just the Emperor, but every observer, every soul in the galaxy watching. "We aren't hiding, we're preparing." The Sovereign stiffened. His mind raced, but Jonah's words seemed to settle into the space, unspoken and undeniable. The Emperor's eyes flicked to the tactical screens, only to find that they were completely blank. His commanders were struggling to figure out what was happening. "What preparations?" the Sovereign demanded, but his voice cracked under the weight of the question. Jonah didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a sip from his thermos, savoring the liquid as though he were drinking away the tension of the entire galaxy. "Patience," Jonah said, his voice smooth. "That's all we need." And just as quickly as he appeared, Jonah's image vanished, leaving the room filled with tension and confusion. 1,000 minds turned toward the unknown, trying to predict the next move. The Emperor's confidence was slipping, and the icy grip of uncertainty was taking hold. No one noticed that the humans weren't just preparing for battle, they were reorganizing. In places that had once been thought of as secure, human activity ramped up with unprecedented precision. No one was moving in haste, but the energy was undeniable. Across the galaxy, human civilians began to return to their homeworlds. Freight carriers loaded materials of every kind, carefully transporting everything from mined resources to repair equipment. Engineers activated dormant star fortresses. Factories buzzed with quiet efficiency as they produced materials that had once been thought unnecessary for peacetime. Then came the glitter paint. Across star systems, ships were spotted painting their hulls with vibrant colors. Rich, unrestrained designs that seemed almost absurd when seen from the stoic alien perspective. What could it possibly mean? The galaxy was on edge, and humans were turning the fabric of space into their canvas. Analysts quarreled over the meaning of this act. Was it psychological warfare, a clever distraction, or something else entirely? Jonah chuckled quietly when he heard the reports. "Humans get creative when we're under pressure," he remarked lightly, offering no further explanation. Still, the mystery deepened as strange structures began to form in the darker reaches of space. Somewhere far beyond the reach of the Empire's standard patrol routes, scout ships disappeared one by one. When their transmissions returned, they were distorted, garbled, filled with static and a sense of growing fear. "It's a cage," one scout's voice had said before the signal vanished. "Or a corridor. No, something else." The Empire dismissed the reports as interference, calling it static from distant space. But the truth was beginning to reveal itself. Jonah's people were more than clever. They were orchestrating something, and the galaxy could feel it drawing closer. Jonah's next encounter was with the officials at Heroin Station, a mid-tier Imperial world located on the Outer Rim. His message was clear. Humans were watching, humans were waiting. The atmosphere in the station's grand hall was thick with the tension of uncertain diplomacy. Jonah walked calmly, his hands tucked behind his back, as if at any moment he might be walking through his own living room. A local official approached him with a stiff smile, one hand extended in an attempt at warmth. "Commander Hale, our condolences for your loss," the governor said. "The death of General North was a tragedy. Please know that Heroin Station is here to support you." Jonah tilted his head slightly, pausing just long enough to unsettle the room. "Your condolences are kind," he said, his voice steady. "Kindness is a rare commodity these days." His tone never wavered. It was like a surgeon's precision, direct, calm, and terrifying. The room went deathly still. The governor didn't know whether to offer comfort or retreat. Jonah's quiet dignity hung in the air like a weapon sheathed in velvet. As they walked through the corridors of Heroin Station, reports trickled in. Ships were being relocated. Materials were being moved. Even the smallest of details were part of the grand plan that had been set in motion without the Empire's knowledge. Jonah's voice remained soft as he responded to the questions rising around him. "Humans get artsy under stress," he said with an enigmatic smile. But the situation was not as lighthearted as it sounded. Each action the humans took was designed to destabilize, to prepare a new future. The entire galaxy was about to learn that the human way was not one of explosive violence, but of quiet, deliberate preparation. Heron Station had never felt so uncomfortably quiet. The hum of its reactors sounded suddenly too loud, the air too thin, the walls too close. As Commander Jonah Hale walked alongside the governor, officers and diplomats trailed several steps behind him, whispering uncertain theories they were too afraid to voice aloud. "Commander," one officer finally said, his voice cracking under the strain, "your fleets are regrouping in patterns that, well, they resemble old Terran war formations." Jonah paused mid-step, glanced at him, and gave a small, polite nod, the kind one might give a child who had finally noticed the obvious. "Do they? Fascinating." His tone was calm, pleasant even, but the officer paled as if struck. The group entered the main conference suite, a room designed for interspecies negotiations, now thick with the metallic scent of fear. Jonah took the central seat without hesitation, placing a small gift bag on the polished obsidian table. Inside were items that had become infamous across the diplomatic channels: roasted earth coffee, a chip containing old country music, and a handmade bracelet woven from blue and white threads. Each object felt innocent, yet deeply unsettling in context. Heroin's governor cleared her throat. "These gifts, are they symbolic, or should we interpret them as—" "A gesture," Jonah said lightly. "Humans appreciate gestures." The governor blinked twice. She didn't want clarification. Clarification felt dangerous. Reports streamed continuously across the holoscreens lining the conference room. Human civilians returning home in synchronized flows. Freight carriers loaded with helium-3, raw tungsten, reactor cells. Star fortresses reactivating across forgotten sectors. Massive shipments of glitter paint whose purpose no one understood. Fleets forming shapes known only to human historians and nightmares. The Empire labeled it all coincidence. The rest of the galaxy wasn't so naive. A junior officer, too young to hide his nerves, suddenly slammed a holopad down on the table. "You expect us to believe this is diplomacy?" he snapped. "Your people are mobilizing for war. You're destabilizing whole sectors." Jonah stirred the coffee in his mug with thoughtful grace. "Preparing," he corrected gently. "Not mobilizing. Preparing implies we were caught off guard. We weren't." The officer's breath hitched. Another official leaned forward, desperation leaking into her voice. "What are you planning?" Jonah's expression warmed, almost affectionate. "You killed the one person who consistently advocated for moderation," he replied quietly. "General North kept the worst parts of us leashed." He lifted his eyes toward them. "You removed the leash." The room went still. No one spoke, no one needed to. Jonah reached into the gift bag and withdrew the woven bracelet. Its simple threads seemed out of place amid the polished marble and cold metal of the station in human culture, he said, sliding it toward the officers. "This symbolizes loyalty. I brought one for your emperor as well." No one touched it. Touching it felt like accepting a fate already written. Meanwhile, across distant sectors, human fleets were moving with chilling purpose. Patrols vanished into deep space pockets. Carrier groups took positions along forgotten trade routes. One formation even emitted low-frequency Earth melodies. Old war songs, distorted by the vacuum, drifting eerily through comms. Alien scholars recognized the arrangement. "This is a no-retreat posture," one whispered. "These are the formations they used when losing was unacceptable." At Heroin Station, alarms blared suddenly. Satellite arrays picked up a massive, growing energy signature from a region the Empire had long ignored. The screens flickered, then resolved into a blurry silhouette, a colossal ring-like structure pulsing with rhythmic, gravitic waves. The room went silent. "What is that?" someone breathed. Speculation erupted immediately. "A weapon. A fortress. A trap. No, all three." Jonah stood. His movements had the precision of a ritual, each action deliberate. The governor hurried after him. "Commander, please, you must tell us what this is leading to." He turned to her with a kindness so profound it forced tears to her eyes. "We are always willing to negotiate," he said softly, "before consequences, or after." The governor choked on her breath. "Consequences for who?" Jonah smiled, and for the first time it wasn't warm. "Phase 2. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It begins very soon." He stepped into the shuttle bay as emergency broadcasts from across the Empire compiled new data streams, all pointing to one horrific conclusion. Human fleets were converging, thousands of them, perfectly synchronized. Energy signatures spiked across the projection. Warp geometry twisted. Space bent like soft metal under a hammer. The anomaly tore itself open with the quiet force of a slow, deliberate breath. Light bent inward, spiraling like threads being pulled into a loom, weaving a pattern that defied traditional physics. Admirals across the Empire froze as the impossible unfolded. A widening wound in space that pulsed with eerie symmetry. From within the swirling rupture, human starships emerged, not in chaotic bursts, not in aggressive charges, but in elegant, synchronized lines, arrayed with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. Their formations moved like choreography, an artful arrangement of war. The human fleets didn't fire a shot. They didn't broadcast threats. They simply arrived. And that was terrifying enough. Inside the Imperial War Room, an officer clutched the edge of his console until his knuckles went pale. This can't be real." Another whispered, "How long have they been building this?" No one answered, because the silence was the answer. Humanity had hidden their movements behind their own grief. They had shut off their networks, pulled diplomats home, vanished entire armadas into the dark. And all of it had been the curtain dropping before the reveal. A technician replayed the gravitic readings. "It's not just a fleet," she said in a trembling voice. "There's a structure behind them." The image sharpened. A colossal geometric lattice made of interlocking rings and glowing spines. Its surface pulsed with light patterns that flickered like heartbeat rhythms, stretched across inhuman distances. "It's alive," someone whispered. "No," replied a scientist with a hollow expression. "It's coordinated." Then Jonah Hale appeared again, calm, steady, framed by the luminous architecture behind him. His hologram flickered into view across every Imperial command station, every ship's bridge, every diplomatic hub. "You seem alarmed," Jonah said gently. "Please don't be. Stress is terrible for longevity." The attempt at humor only deepened the panic. Empire strategists frantically scanned the shifting patterns behind him, convinced they were coded messages or weapon signatures. They weren't wrong. The structure wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was worse. Jonah lifted a hand and stepped slightly to the side. "General North taught restraint," he said. "You removed her. Now you see the version of us she kept submerged." A cold shiver ran through the room. Suddenly, the star map behind Jonah shifted to show thousands of gravitic signatures scattered across hyperspace corridors, each one a pulsing node of energy. The war room gasped. "You're surrounded," someone whispered to the sovereign. The realization hit like a gravitational wave. Humanity had ceded hyperspace. The Empire, the largest military force in the galaxy, had been effectively caged by human engineering, so advanced their scientists couldn't even classify the readings. A physicist leaned forward, horror widening her eyes. "They're connected, like nerves." Jonah nodded. "Close enough. We've always been fond of symmetry. The sovereign slammed a fist onto his throne's console. Deactivate them at once. I can't, Jonah replied with soft finality. They're part of hyperspace now, part of the environment. The words dropped like a weight onto the chamber. A seasoned imperial general whispered, "We have awakened something ancient in them." Jonah didn't argue. "We wanted peace," he continued quietly. "We pleaded for it. Peace is a partnership, not obedience." Lights across the war room flickered as the gravitic seeds pulsed in unison. The air felt colder, as though the vacuum outside had crept indoors. One admiral finally snapped, voice shaking, "If you attack, we will retaliate with everything we have left." Jonah's expression softened with an almost mournful disappointment. "You misunderstand. Retaliation implies sequence." He tapped the holographic map. "This is simultaneity." Entire Imperial supply routes lit up in red shipyards blinked offline. Communication hubs dimmed. Fleets found themselves isolated in empty space. The sovereign staggered, gripping the arm of his throne. "This is an act of war," he shouted. Jonah shook his head slowly. "War began," he said, "when you executed her." His voice never rose. It didn't need to. As Jonah spoke, new coordinates illuminated across the map, inside Imperial territory. Human vessels were already there, quiet, precise, waiting. "You forced our hand," Jonah whispered. Then alarms erupted across the war room. Hyperspace lanes collapsing, transport routes dissolving, sensors screaming overload warnings. Imperial networks died one by one. Jonah's image flickered, stabilizing just long enough for him to deliver a final line. "Phase 3 begins now." And then the screens went black. The blackout lasted only a moment, but for the Empire it felt like a lifetime, like the universe had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. When the screens returned, the first face they saw was not Jonah's. It was hers. A woman stood beside him, her form built of shimmering photons and luminous contours. Her features were unmistakable. Valera North, the executed general, now reconstructed as a digital consciousness, her presence glowing with a serene, focused intensity that hit the war room like a shockwave. Gasps rippled through the Imperial ranks. "That's impossible," a commander whispered, stepping back. "We killed her." Jonah stood calmly next to her, hands folded behind his back. "You killed her body," he corrected, "not her mind." Valera's holographic gaze drifted across the terrified room, steady and unblinking. "You thought removing me would fracture them," she said, "but you only clarified their direction." Her voice held no bitterness. That somehow made it worse. Imperial ships across the core sectors began panicking. Fleets attempted to jump away, firing up warp engines only to find themselves locked in place, as if held gently by unseen hands. Rushing waves of gravitic influence washed across the star systems, tugging at ships and structures in a slow, rhythmic pulse. Not violent, but inescapable. One admiral slammed her fist on the control console. "Weapons online! Fire at the gravitational nodes!" Dreadnoughts unleashed volleys of plasma lances and rail cannon fire, but the projectiles vanished the moment they touched the warp space around the nodes. It was like throwing stones into a lake that refused to ripple. A scientist stared at the readings, horrified. "They're not shields. They're rewriting the rules as the shots arrive." Jonah nodded sympathetically. "Think of it as a gentle redirection." Valera stepped forward, her presence brightening slightly. "Your empire hides behind obedience," she said. "Behind silence, behind fear. You believe my execution would silence humanity too." Her expression softened with something almost mournful. "You never understood us." The Emperor appeared on screen again, his crown askew, his voice hoarse with barely contained panic. "This aggression ends now. Humanity will cease operations or we will retaliate with full force." Jonah blinked once slowly. "You don't have full force anymore." The sovereign's breathing became ragged. Behind Jonah, the colossal lattice structure flared to life, glowing like a star caught in the skeleton of a machine. Light cascaded outward, touching every ship, every station, every shadowed corner of Imperial territory. It wasn't destructive. It was revealing. Cloaked stations flickered into view. Hidden weapons arrays were exposed. Buried command bunkers became visible through planetary crust, secrets the Empire had held for centuries, laid bare in the span of a heartbeat. What? What is that? The Emperor croaked. Jonah's reply was gentle candlelight. The luminous wave swept gently across the throne world, revealing every clandestine facility and every buried atrocity the Empire had quietly tucked away. Civilians saw truth broadcast across their skies like constellations. Entire fleets surrendered on the spot, not out of defeat, but out of shame. Jonah continued. Your power depended on shadows. We are simply removing the darkness. The sovereign, desperate, gave his final command. All remaining ships, attack! Attack them! Now! Dozens of vessels roared toward the human perimeter, engines burning white-hot, but the lattice exhaled. A single pulse, not violent, not lethal, just inevitability made manifest. The Imperial Armada froze mid-charge, held motionless by a perfectly balanced gravitational field. Even internal lights flickered as the ship's system struggled futilely against the invisible restraint. Valera's hologram raised a hand, palm open. Violence isn't necessary, she said quietly. You've already lost. The Emperor collapsed into his throne as the truth reached him. The empire he commanded, the empire that spanned dozens of star systems, was no longer in control of its own engines, its own fleets, or even its own secrets. Jonah stepped forward, voice low and steady. We will dismantle your war machine piece by piece, he said. Not with anger, with precision, with responsibility. Human operatives moved like clockwork across the Imperial network. Command relays shut down. Weapon grids powered off. Fleet command centers quietly overridden. Civilian sectors left untouched. Candlelight guided every motion. Valera's gaze turned to Jonah, her expression softening with encoded emotion. They feared our rage, she murmured. Jonah nodded. They should have feared our discipline. Across the galaxy, screens flickered as the Emperor, trembling, asked his final question. Why? Why spare us?